Do you ever see a successful woman on your feed or in a magazine and think, wow, it must be nice to have it so easy? Well, think again. Behind that glossy cover or smiling face is a ton of hard work, countless failures, and endless learning experiences. I'm Rebecca Minkoff, and I'm here to tell you that success isn't a walk in the park. It takes grit, resilience, and a willingness to take risks. That's why I created Superwoman, a podcast that peels back the varnish and gets into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to make it as a woman in today's world. From luminaries and game changers to women you've never heard of but should, this podcast is here to inspire you to take your next leap, no matter how daunting it may seem. We'll explore the sacrifices these women have made, the highs and lows they've experienced, and the lessons they've learned along the way. So if you're ready to be inspired and learn from some of the most successful women out there, join me on Superwomen. Together, we'll uncover the stories behind the successes and prove that with hard work, determination, and a little bit of luck, anything is possible. Hey everyone, you're listening to Superwomen. Today's guest is the indomitable Bonnie Hammer, the vice chairman of NBCUniversal and author of the incredible book, 15 Lies Women Are Told at Work and the Truth We Need to Succeed. We dive into the book. What are the lies women are actually told that are actually sabotage to ourselves and our career path if we believe them? And how she views your career path as a web versus a North Star that you simply follow. I loved meeting her. We had a nice, warm, genuine conversation, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Take a listen. Bonnie, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you.
And I'm delighted to be here. I've followed you for so many years, not just the podcast, obviously, but your whole career. Oh. And you're one of these women who started with nothing and just built an entire world. I love it.
Well, thank you. That means a lot coming from you. So we will get to your current role as the vice chair of NBCUniversal, which I can't even imagine. I think you mentioned when we were talking before, 3,000 people. What do you think you want to be when you were growing up?
Oh, it's interesting. When I was young, I didn't have my own dreams. They were dreams that were planted by other people. My mom, who never actually even went to college, had this fantasy about being a lawyer. So when I was probably early high school, she was trying to get me to go on a course that would get me to law school. That didn't work. But it was in college where I fell in love with photography. And that became a real passion for me. And I loved telling a story through a single image. And then, of course, I stumbled into a couple of jobs, and none of those jobs were my fantasy. First, I was stuck in a dark room, doing basically processing for a commercial photographer. So forget manicures, my fingers were all yellow and chemical. I mean, very different from iPod, an iPhone photograph these days, you actually had chemicals and rolls of film. So I left that. Then I basically got upgraded a little bit to take photographs with him in the studio. And I realized I didn't like that either because it was all artificial lighting, artificial coloring. Nothing was organic. Then I got into photojournalism, but because I was so green and so young, chasing ambulances wasn't my thing either. So I ended up going back to graduate school, still not losing the idea of photography, and ended up getting an internship as a freelance photographer, basically meaning I worked for free, chasing around kids on a set. And one day they fired a bunch of production assistants, asked me if I wanted a job, and that was it. My first day in a TV studio, and I never looked back.
What do you think it was about being on set and in the TV studio that you knew after trying so many things, okay, this is the right thing?
I think it was the energy and the collaboration. There was, everybody had to work together, and I was learning something every day, whether it was from the camera people, the lighting people, the crew itself, or the kids who were on the set learning lines, reading scripts, writers rewriting scripts. There was so much energy, excitement, and actual fun. And no day was the same. every day brought different challenges, different problems, but also just different interesting angles to learn something from. So I just saw it as something that had a lot of energy in it. And that energy was what excited me. And it was also the ability to tell a story. It was no longer in one image. It had writing and it had camera people. It had 3 million things, but it was still telling a story. And so what happened for me is I found another way to get involved and tell a story, but I didn't have to give up my passion of photography. I realized it just didn't have to be my boss.
When you were sitting there on set, did you see a clear path of, okay, I'm now in the right space. This is what I want to be? Or did you sort of discover that as you rose through the ranks and kept getting new kind of gigs?
No, I didn't really see a path for me. I felt so fortunate at the time to have a job and to be in an industry that to me was so exciting that I kind of just went with the flow and tried to learn and ask a lot of questions and just made myself useful. So especially for the first decade or so, it was really where the opportunities took me. I didn't have that, initial dream or I'm going to be either a great producer or a great executive. I honestly don't think in those early days of my 20s, I had any clue what the industry was about. Yeah. And very different from these days. I just wasn't educated in the breadth of the field or what my own capabilities were. I just had a job and kept getting other ones and was going to see where it led me. And in some ways, I think it really worked for me because I followed opportunities rather than had to follow like what my mom's dream was, go to law school, take the boards, be a lawyer and become a partner in a company. It wasn't that in any way that direct. It was really zigzagging.
Yeah. Was your mom disappointed and was that hard? Like when I moved here and my aunt was like, you're not going to college. Like you will never amount to anything if you don't go to college. And she was so disgusted with me. But like, was it hard when you said to your mom, I'm following this path? You didn't know where it was going to lead?
No, my father was a Russian immigrant who started with nothing, didn't go to college, but ended teaching years later, oddly, in Brooklyn. And my mom also basically worked on the books for my dad when he started his own business, but had a fantasy of what she wanted me to be. But I think the fact that I did anything beyond just get my MRS was exciting for them.
Right.
And so again, it was very much back then a boys' culture in Jewish families many, many years ago. It was the son that was supposed to be the doctor, the lawyer, the Indian chief, whatever it was. And women were just supposed to get married and be homekeepers.
Right. Right. So you set yourself up in this new arena. You spend 10 years, taking advantage of every opportunity. What did it look like to then rise through the ranks and then eventually become the vice chair? And what does a vice chair do?
I never, as I bobbed and weaved, I was always very conscious of learning and doing and growing in a specific space. And I wasn't kind of gunning for that chairman and then ultimately vice chair or chair role. So with each bob and weave, I kind of embraced what that change was, went with it, learned, which somehow kicked another door open in another way. And I just went with the flow. And so I was very lucky to kind of run first one, then two, then multiple cable channels, then a content studio connected to the cable channels, then ran all of cable for NBCU other than news. Then eventually, Steve Burke, my boss at the time, wanted to start a streamer. And because of all my varied experience, basically kind of kicked me to the left and said, all right, assemble a team. We don't have that much money to do it, but launch a streamer. So everything was a new challenge. It was really fun. And so I've been chair of a variety of different areas. And to me, what was great about it is the team spirit. I kind of look back to my original excitement of why I loved being in a studio. And I think over the years recreated the collaboration, the team spirit. You know, we all laugh together, cry together, work together. And that was the fun of my entire career. A vice chair is very different. And my first job in that TV job was basically all the other production assistants had kids, humans to follow. I had a dog. So my first job was really following around and cleaning up the crap of that dog who was a cast member. And when I joke about being a vice chair, because I'm no longer responsible for creating content or running full teams, I view it as a very similar job to my first one. I'm basically helping different individuals and different teams and different people, you know, navigate the crap when you get to a high level, to get them to do their jobs in their world. So help them navigate through the politics, what the changes, the structures and restructures to help them succeed.
Wow. And you mentioned 3,000 people you potentially touch.
Well, I think that in general, I don't know how many people are at NBCU right now, but a lot. But when I was overseeing all of the cable area, there were about 2,000 people just in cable alone back then, between all of the channels and all of the different pieces of those channels.
And I think what people don't realize is that NBCUniversal covers multiple arenas. For instance, you know, I've been lucky enough to be collaborating on the merchandise for Wicked, right? And
that's fabulous.
Yeah, which is going to be exciting. So that's, you know, that's that aspect. Then there's the Today Show, right? Which, you know, I've been lucky enough to be on many times. And then now I'm on Roni, good or for bad. So it really spans many different arenas. And what I'm curious to hear your viewpoint on is the landscape of content and TV, movie, streaming. It, you know, it feels as terrible as it is in fashion when it's like we have to be a media entity, right? Essentially as a brand. How have you sort of, from your bird's eye view, like been able to see the changes in the industry and, you know, what's been exciting for you to usher in and change?
Oh, it's a big question, an interesting one. First of all, NBCU has been a phenomenal place to work based on exactly what you said. There's so many different divisions, so many entities, whether it's Universal Film, whether it's all the TV studios and the film studios, the news division, the cable channels, the broadcast channels, the streamer. It's a ginormous entity, but it does have a culture of working together and interrelating in a very, very healthy way. And that's been phenomenal. What's happening in all industries now is the merging. It's a restructure. It's a fear of what AI is going to do negatively, as well as the excitement of what it could do positively. And all of that change makes people very, very nervous because new skills are going to be needed. Restructures are going to have to lose people by the nature of merging different divisions. So I do believe there's a lot of nervousness and a lot of fear about what our worlds are going to look like. However, when you think about NBCU at large, what is it genuinely about? It's about content, whether it's film content, park content, TV series, whether it's streaming or, you know, broadcast or cable. It's still all about storytelling and content or news and sports, but you need those vehicles for distribution. So I think if people will just concentrate on the positive, that our worlds are not going to disappear, just like yours won't. You may distribute fashion in a different way. There may be fewer people wandering through stores, but not necessarily buying less. It's a challenge of how do you get your content or your wares in a place where distribution can happen easily and in a fun way. And I think that's what we're all dealing with, how our worlds are being changed and how we have to adjust or readjust and embrace that change rather than fear the change. And I think that's what happens for all people who continue to succeed instead of frankly bitching about all these changes that are happening.
Yeah.
Embrace it, run towards it, and try to figure out how you fit in or how you can make it work for you and your industry, or your division.
Yep. I think that's a really great point, because we all are obviously the bitching. It's hard not to do, but it's just like embrace it and figure out what you can do from it. I was having almost the same conversation with my CEO today of like, everything is disappearing where we distribute to. How are we going to grow the business with things, changing? I'd love to transition into your book. You already have a hard enough job, I'm assuming, day to day, and you were like, let me take on the task of writing a book. So tell me what it's about and what people can look forward to from it being in paperback, but also you launched it in May.
The book launched actually in May 7th, and is doing incredibly well. I'm actually pretty shocked. It's been a bestseller, which I never expected. I wrote the book, Thank You, COVID, because I commuted and still commute from Connecticut to New York on a daily basis. And if all of a sudden during COVID, I had hours back, I wasn't on a train or in a car for 4.5 hours a day going back and forth. And so I had some freedom. And for me, it was a way to figure out how to do something that was individual, independent, where I could, at this stage of my life, pay it forward and kind of give back based on my own life experience, my own work experience. So the book is called 15 Lies Women Are Told at Work and the Truth We Need to Succeed. And it's basically calling bullshit on all the cliches that women have been brought up to believe that if they genuinely follow, is self-sabotage. And it's basically offering my own truths and some sound advice based on my own experience, my own screw ups, etc., over my 50 years working, to help them navigate the corporate world, or frankly, any job, but basically a man's world.
So will you share some of the fake news lies that we've been told?
Sure. I mean, they're all over the place, which I'm sure you deal with and see every day, from fake it till you make it. In my mind, the minute you fake it and get caught in a lie, you'll never get that trust back. You could have it all. Oh, really? Maybe in hindsight. But the biggest issue there is your all, Rebecca, and my all are very, very different. So What are we measuring against?
Yeah.
What you have to do is figure out, what do you need and what do you want from life? And even then, prioritize what's realistic and what's not.
Yeah.
What women have are choices. They have the agency over making those decisions now. And that's what our grandmas didn't have. There weren't those kinds of choices. The only way is up. We talked about it a little before, is, when you think about your career rung by rung, as a ladder going upwards, you're really missing out on a lot of opportunities. What I really love and what I think most women need is a way to look at your career almost as a web, as zigzagging through and broadening your strengths and your experiences and your exposure, so you get out of that one skill set and have a variety of things to offer. Because as we just talked about as well, industries are changing, they're restructuring, industries are closing down, AI is going to take over. And if you have only one single skill set, it's very hard to figure out what you're going to do if your world changes. I talk about, instead of following your dreams, follow the opportunities, and show people how to navigate that. For the younger generation going into the work world, I talk a lot about the difference between knowing your worth and knowing your professional worth. Your personal worth, basically you're born with, and nobody should or could ever take that away. But your professional worth, you have to work at if you're going to be worth anything.
Yeah.
And I think the young generation coming in right now, thanks to my generation, who have given them A's for effort, trophies for showing
Everybody gets
up.
an award. Yep.
We made it so easy for the younger generation just to basically participate and show up that they kind of did grunt work. And as I said, like my first job was cleaning dog crap. I did it with a smile, and because people liked having me around because I did the crap work, they kept promoting me because they knew I had the right attitude.
Yeah.
So it hits so many different pieces of cliches that we've gone through. It's a man's world. My point is only if you let it be. Yeah. And I talk about the difference of men and women and how we manage and how we support other women or should support other women. It's not always the case, and how to navigate reading a room and understanding how to read other people's agendas in order to get what you need and you want. And then there's one, which is, I think one of the cliches is good things happen to those who wait. And my thing is good things happen to those who act. It's a form of chutzpah, which I call gutzpah, which is basically being bold but not brazen, confident, not arrogant. So it's everyday stuff that we've been told our entire lives, and why it's going to hurt you and why what I give you as the truth will work if you master and then give ways to master. Very simply laid out. It's the cliche. It's why it came to be. It's the truth. It's my take. And then it's basically the final word, which gives advice of what to do, what not to do.
I love it. I need to read it. Clearly, I'm
have fun with it. Yeah, it's fun too. I talk about my screw ups, and I talk about how it happened, why it happened, and how I turned it around. But it's also funny. Yeah. I don't take anything that seriously. Yeah. And I think we all know there's so many advice books out there, but there are very, very few books that talk about bad advice. And this kind of knocks the bad advice.
I love it. Speaking of screw ups, what's been a major screw up where you've had to eat crow and you were like, oh, how do I fix this one?
Well, yeah, there've been a lot, but I think the hardest.
And there are usually a lot, FYI, right?
Yeah, there are a lot. And if people tell you or ever, intimate that they have never screwed up or things that have happened to them, it's always because of somebody else. That too is bullshit. We all screw up. And I think when we embrace how we screw up, and show a bit of humility is when people kind of want to help you out of that situation. Probably the toughest one for me to face with my team at the time was we had built a ginormous campaign around a show which we thought was going to be a huge success. It was called Political Animals, and we put tons of money. We didn't even test the pilot. We were just going to go because it had Sigourney Weaver in it, and it was, a little bit framed around Hillary Clinton, but it was fun and a little edgy, etc. When we got to the end, and it was the first show launched with a new boss after Comcast just bought us from GE, and up until then, USA Network, every show was a big success. We had launched Suits, everything was just glowing. This was our first edgy show, and boy, did it fail big. When we got the ratings back, it was where we thought we may get a 5 rating. I think we got a 0.5 rating, and we all thought it was ginormous mistake. But I remember saying to myself, I just can't BS about this. None of us have any idea why it screwed up or we screwed up. And I remember sending a very, very early email. I would get a call from my research guy early morning before anything was public, and he would let me know how we rated that day, that week, whatever. And I remember when he called, he said, "You're not going to believe this, sit down." And I thought it was going to be a big celebration. And he said, "The ratings are awful."
Oh, no.
Went through it. And I remember sending, to my boss, Steve, we do not know why. We will look into it. We will figure it out. But this is the lowest rating USA has gotten over a decade.
Wow.
I just wanted to let you know before you saw it in print. And it was interesting because my thought was, oh, I have a new boss. It's a new company. It's the first new launch of the season. I'm going to get fired. And, I took it all. It had nothing to do with my team. I was, the chair of cable and the head of USA based on that. And what I found out was the admiration he ended up having because I was honest. I faced it. I sent him an email with no excuses and blaming it on nobody, owning it myself, that for him, that's the kind of person he wanted around.
Yeah.
So it was honesty, it was humility, but it was it wasn't just a rating screw up. I mean, the amount of money that we lost based on lousy ratings was ginormous.
Wow.
On the other side, though, one of the things I think it's important is to know how to navigate around something you don't get and you expect. There was another time earlier when I was promised NBC Network. Now, I've had all the cable divisions, but years and years ago, cable was the lowly stepchild and the broadcast, was everything.
Right.
And I was promised the gig when they were going to be changing people out. And I remember exactly the weekend when I found out it was not happening. It was Memorial Day weekend. And one of my other colleagues was on a plane, one of the corporate jets going east to west, with my boss at the time, which was Jeff Zucker, who, by the way, I adore. But it was, he decided, because GE at the time wanted him to swing for the fences, that he was going to give the NBC job to someone else. And it was a colleague on the plane who overheard what was going to happen on that Tuesday after Memorial Day, who called me from LA and said, "I just think you need to know this. This is what's going to happen." I was lucky because it gave me the weekend before Jeff called me and said, "This is what I have to do." I found out afterwards that the reason it happened was GE was so afraid USA would spiral down. It was making so much money. The cable group was making far more money at the time than broadcast, that he didn't want me to leave the cable division.
Right.
So I realized that, okay, they need me. They clearly don't want me to leave. So what can I get? So I then said, okay, if you don't want me to leave, because you basically promised me something I'm not going to get, I want a studio. Give me a content studio that I can create from nothing with my team so we can produce our own content. And I got it.
Wow.
So, and that was my growth path. And the truth was the cable studio grew, my team grew, and the guy who got the job that this chick didn't was gone in 2 years.
Wow. Wow.
So it works in different ways.
Yeah. I think though that, from what I'm hearing, you take these opportunities, you don't have an ego about it, and then you're able to see these paths that eventually lead you to somewhere higher. So it might be lateral to start, but like you said, it's a web. I've never viewed it that way. And,
it doesn't mean you don't get emotional. I would be lying if I said there are times I didn't come home and just, kind of want to punch my punching bag and just get so angry at the situation. And you have to feel it and you have to let it out. But it does zero to kind of keep that anger inside your system. You have to basically funnel it in a different direction. And mine has always been, okay, that's not going to happen. Arguing about it or fighting for it is going to be meaningless because it's a done deed. So what can I get instead? What can I do instead? Who can I talk to instead? or how can I make this more positive?
Yeah.
So that has always been my way. It's not that I don't feel it, but I move on rather than trying to bang down a door that's never going to open.
Yeah, I love it. So since you've listened to a couple of my podcasts, I like to end with 2 questions for all my guests. What would we be surprised to know about you? It can be personal, professional, a quirk, a habit, something embarrassing. I usually share embarrassing things, but you don't have to.
Probably my concern about next chapters for myself. I'm a big believer that there's always another path, another web, another zig or zag. And it's the first time in my life with everybody who does know me, who knows I'm a control freak and know everything that's going to happen. I'm a detail person. I don't know what that's going to be. And so it's probably the first time in over 50 years of working, being employed by someone else, trying to figure out what I myself can create at this stage in life, and also trying to create a new path, how the world looks, especially our culture looks at aging women.
It's a real fucking problem.
It is. It is. And it doesn't exist throughout the world. It is significantly noisy in our culture, in our world.
Yeah.
And I know so many women of my age right now who are vital, who are still in great shape, who you probably, other than looking at a piece of paper, couldn't tell, and I'm not talking about surgery or anything else, that if you just watch them in action, you couldn't tell them apart from a 45-year-old.
Yeah.
And yet, when somebody sees that number on a piece of paper, or when people are honest enough to talk about it, it's just a knee jerk. So one of my goals is trying to figure out how to be one of many of a group of women that I hopefully coordinate with and work with to kind of show and test the world that that's not how it has to be.
Yeah.
Once you get out of this corporate umbrella.
Yeah, I love that. I have a long list of women that I'm happy to share with you. Not that you need my introductions at all, but
are you kidding? I love meeting new people, and I think every connection somehow opens a door to something else. So I'm completely open towards that.
Okay, good. My last question, I felt like you gave such great advice throughout this interview, but is there any piece of advice either someone gave to you or that you learned and applied outside of your book, because everyone has to read the book and buy it, that you wanted to pass on?
Yep. There's one thing that has always stayed in my memory, will never disappear. And it's what my dad gave me when I was very, very young and struggling with a math test or a math problem or whatever. That probably is the way I live. And there's no such word as can't. You can't do something only because you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah, I love that.
And I do believe it. And I think I've lived my life with that motto.
Yeah, I love it. And you might take 100 tries before you can, or more.
Doesn't matter.
Right.
If you can't do it, it's because you're not trying hard enough. You can do anything you want to do if you put your mind to it.
Yeah.
And I believe him because it's actually obviously worked for me.
Yeah, I love it. It's been so awesome to talk to you. Where can everyone read and get the book?
It is everywhere. Obviously, you can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. You can get it at Diesel Books. You can get it. It's out there. Again, it's 15 Lies Women Are Told at Work and the Truth We Need to Succeed. Just type it in and you'll be able to get it.
I love it. Thank you.
And it's Simon & Schuster.
Awesome.
Publisher.
Thank you for your patience in scheduling this. And it was such a treat to meet you.
And a delight.
I just wanted to thank you guys for listening to today's episode. I also want to ask you to rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts. I know it's a pain in the butt, but it actually helps with search and algorithms. So if you love this podcast, it is an easy way to get it more visible and out there. I also want you to follow me on Instagram at Rebecca Minkoff, at RM Superwomen, and be sure to check out my book, Fearless, The New Rules for Unlocking Creativity, Courage, and Success. Thank you again, and you will hear from me next week.